Her name is Rachel. I'm going to divorce you and marry her.
On the 10th anniversary of our marriage, my husband came home with a young woman and said that. In reality, I wanted to scream at him, but I bit my tongue and, with a trembling voice, said,
I can't get a divorce right now. I have to take care of my sick mother.
At that, my husband chuckled dismissively.
Why should I not only support you, but also take care of some incurable sick old woman? No thanks.
The two of them laughed at me, and I felt like I had been struck by lightning.
I'm going to build a happy home with her. You, on the other hand, will have to struggle with your unemployed self and your sick mother. Good luck with that.
Thus, I was abandoned by my ex-husband. However, 25 years later, I was to have a nightmare reunion with him.
Has the old lady kicked the bucket yet? I've got grandkids now, and I'm happy.
I smiled sweetly at my ex-husband, who was taunting me, and told him, I'll introduce you to my company, which has been around for 25 years, and my family. From that moment on, my ex-husband's life would take a turn for the worse. My name is Mary Anderson. I'm 60 years old. This year, as I reflect on my life after reaching my 60th birthday, I realize it has been quite a challenging journey. I'd like to briefly share my life story from my childhood on. I was born to my father, Tom, who worked in the construction industry, and my mother, Susan, who ran a beauty salon at home. Though my father was strict at times, he was loving and always made time for me, and my mother, always smiling, was loved by her clients. I loved them both dearly, and I believe they gave me all the love they had. From a young age, I loved studying, and my parents supported me in that passion. However, that happy life came to an abrupt end when I was in my first year of junior high school. My father, who was involved in a work accident, suddenly passed away.
Please no, open your eyes.
I remember my mother crying, clinging to his body, while I stood behind her in shock. My parents had been very close, so my mother was devastated. I too was deeply shaken by the loss of my beloved father and couldn't eat for a while. But after some time, my mother spoke to me.
Mary, I'll protect you. So let's work hard and live together.
Her eyes were filled with determination. I nodded, making a vow to live and support my mother. After that, my mother reopened her salon, which she had temporarily closed. I helped out after school, cleaning and such, and the regular customers came by one after another, offering their support.
From now on, I have to raise Mary for both of us, so you better keep coming in for haircuts.
My mother said this jokingly to her customers, but deep down, I knew it must have been hard for her. Still, I was saved by her bright spirit. Thanks to the inheritance my father left behind, I was able to continue my education and attend high school. I went to a prestigious school and I studied hard. Unlike most girls, I made it into the advanced class, and when the time came to choose a path, my teacher suggested I go to a national university, but I refused.
We're a single-parent family, and we can't afford tuition. I want to enter the workforce soon to help my mother.
My teacher, looking disappointed, handed me some university brochures and asked me to have a look at them. That night, my mother found the brochures.
Mary, what's this?
I quickly explained.
Mom, it's okay. I won't go to university. I'll work right after I finish high school.
For the first time, my mother looked angry.
What are you talking about? You're so talented, you have to go to university. Women will need an education from now on. I can at least cover the tuition.
But
I was confused, but thanks to my mother's persuasion, I decided to apply to university. In the end, I got into a national university. I started attending while working part-time. My mother supported me as a hairstylist, and I was truly grateful for her help. Eventually, I graduated from university and started working as a researcher for a major pharmaceutical company. At that time, female researchers were quite rare, and most of my colleagues were men in the sciences. Among them, I worked diligently. When I was 24, one of the senior men at work asked me,
I've got someone I'd like you to meet. How about it?
I couldn't turn down my senior's invitation, so I decided to meet with a person he said was his friend. Then, a man dressed in the fashionable style of the time walked up, giving off a polished impression.
Nice to meet you. I'm Henry Miller. I'm a bit nervous.
This was the first time I met Henry, who would later become my husband. My colleague and Henry were college classmates and had been in the same activity club. At the time, Henry worked for a large corporation, and I thought he seemed like quite a catch.
I'm into smart women. I'd be really happy if we could get along.
Having had no experience with romance before, his words made my heart race. After that, Henry and I started meeting regularly, and naturally we began dating. Back then, it was common for women to marry in their early 20s. About a year and a half into our relationship, Henry proposed to me.
Mary, I promise I'll make you happy. Will you marry me?
He said this at a restaurant with a beautiful night view, and I happily nodded in agreement. When I introduced Henry to my mother, she was overjoyed, tears welling up in her eyes.
Mary is getting married. I'm so happy. Henry, please take care of her.
With a smile, Henry said,
I really respect you for raising Mary by yourself all these years. From now on, I'll take care of you too.
Hearing those words, I was certain I had made the right decision in marrying him. Henry's parents also supported our marriage, and we got officially registered. We had a wedding and began our new life in an apartment about 30 minutes away from my parents' house. However, right after we got married, Henry said something surprising.
Hey, now that we're married, you need to quit your job. I want my wife to stay at home.
I was shocked. I had never heard this before during our courtship, and I had expected to continue working. When I voiced my concern, Henry replied,
I want kids, and I want you to handle everything at home. You're going to be working late sometimes, right? You can't keep that up once we're married.
Despite my repeated requests, Henry was firm on his decision. So, reluctantly, I quit my job. At that time, there was still the prevailing belief that women should obey their husbands. I reluctantly left the pharmaceutical company after 3 years, becoming a full-time housewife. My mother was disappointed, but she said,
Well, if Henry insists, there's nothing we can do.
Thus, I became a full-time housewife and worked hard to keep the house perfect. However, Henry would constantly criticize my housekeeping. He never bothered to pick up his clothes or vacuum the floor.
Your cooking is so old-fashioned. Can't you make something more trendy?
When I served him meat and potatoes one day, he complained, and on another day, he asked for a casserole.
This stuff isn't even filling. Use your brain. You're a college graduate.
Then what am I supposed to do?
I wanted to say something, but since I wasn't naturally strong-willed and felt like I was being supported, I had no choice but to obey him. As our 3rd year of marriage came around and I was 28, Henry frequently asked,
How's it been this month? Have you gotten pregnant?
Looks like it didn't happen again.
When I said this, Henry clicked his tongue.
Well, my friend already has 2 kids. I want a kid too, so you need to try harder.
The truth was, I hadn't been able to get pregnant. He criticized my housework and blamed me for not being able to have children. My married life was far from what I had imagined. I consulted my mother about not being able to have kids. The gynecologist suggested some tests, and after undergoing the exams, I was told there was nothing wrong. Henry refused to get tested and shouted at me.
It's your fault we can't have kids. Don't try to blame me. I'm not taking any tests.
He blamed me entirely for our infertility, and my self-esteem began to plummet. Henry continued to boss me around, and before I knew it, I was like a servant being given orders. Even after 5 years of marriage, we still didn't have children, and there was no love left between us. I stayed with Henry mainly because I was a full-time housewife. He controlled the finances, and I had little money of my own. In that situation, the thought of divorce seemed impossible. Around the 6th year of our marriage, Henry started coming home later. He would be gone for long periods with reasons of working overtime or being on a business trip. However, when he came home, sometimes his suit would carry a sweet, feminine fragrance. I had a faint suspicion that there might be another woman. Still, being in a dependent position, I had no choice but to turn a blind eye. Henry's attitude toward me became harsher.
Why am I even supporting someone like you? A useless wife who can't even have kids at 30.
He would throw these words at me almost every night, and I was worn down. When I talked to my mother, she said,
Mary, if it's too hard, it's okay to leave Henry. I have a new spa business that I'm planning, and if you want, you can come back and help me.
At the time, my mother, who was over 50, was working energetically.
My shop even has famous actresses as customers.
My mother said, looking pleased. I took comfort in her words and would always respond like this.
I'll try a little longer.
However, when I was 34,
I haven't been feeling well lately, and I can't keep up with the shop.
I got a report from my mother. I took my mother, who had a high fever, to the hospital. She underwent several tests, but the cause remained unknown. Although my mother's fever initially subsided, she repeatedly experienced high fevers again. She developed a rash, and she complained of severe joint pain. Eventually, my mother had to be hospitalized without knowing the cause. I told Henry,
My mother has an unknown illness and has to be hospitalized. I want to visit her at the hospital for a while. Is that okay?
Henry twisted his face into a scowl.
I'm not paying for any hospital bills. And stop worrying about your mom so much. Take care of the house. That's all you're good for.
Yes.
I answered, looking down. From behind, I could still smell the fragrance on Henry. After that, my mother was hospitalized, and in between doing the housework, I visited her at the hospital. Henry never once came to visit my mother. My mother underwent numerous tests, but they never found the cause of her symptoms. She grew weaker and weaker, and it became painful to watch. In the end, my mother was diagnosed with a rare, incurable disease. There was no cure, no medication, and no treatment available for her condition. My mother had just paid for the renovation costs to start a beauty salon, and she didn't have much savings left. Her savings dwindled quickly during her long hospitalization, and I finally had to swallow my pride and ask Henry for help.
Mom has an incurable disease. Please allow us to use the household funds for her hospital expenses.
Henry's face went expressionless for a moment, then he walked out of the house. I was puzzled by his sudden exit, but an hour later, he returned with a young woman.
Nice to meet you. Wow, you really are as plain as Henry said.
The woman looked at my face and burst into laughter. Henry then told me,
This is Rachel. I'm going to divorce you and marry her.
I was stunned. This woman in front of me was his mistress. I wanted to shout at Henry, to lash out at him. But I held myself back and with a trembling voice said,
I can't get divorced right now. I have to take care of my sick mother.
At this, Henry snorted dismissively.
Why should I not only support you, but also take care of some old woman with an incurable disease? No thanks.
As my face froze, like I had been struck by lightning, Henry and Rachel chuckled to themselves.
You're abandoning me and my sick mother?
When I said that, Henry gave a sly, lecherous smile.
I'll tell you something. Rachel's pregnant with my child. A child that you, after 10 years, couldn't have. I'm going to build a happy family with her. You'll just struggle with your sick mother and your unemployment.
I no longer had the energy to resist. Tears streamed down my face as I signed the divorce papers that Henry had thrust at me and packed my belongings to leave. Henry and Rachel watched me, grinning the entire time. When I told my mother, she was shocked and cried.
I'm so sorry for causing this.
No, Mom, it's not your fault. Let's just focus on getting better for now.
But I was at a loss. What was I supposed to do now? At 35, unemployed. I hadn't worked in 10 years and had no savings of my own. Then my mother said,
Mary, about the future.
I listened to my mother's words until the end and nodded strongly. This was the only path left for us. It was the only way for me and my mother to live from now on. I gathered my strength and began to take one step at a time. 25 years passed. Recently, I turned 60 and I was at a newly built shopping mall. After leaving a cosmetic store, I walked into the corridor. Suddenly, I made eye contact with a person coming toward me.
Hey, is that you, Mary?
It was Henry, the ex-husband I hadn't seen in 25 years. It seemed like he had changed jobs and moved out of the house after our divorce, so we hadn't crossed paths since the day he declared the divorce. I had almost forgotten his face, but I instantly recognized his voice. However, Henry's appearance had changed quite a lot. His hair had thinned, and his body looked very thin and unhealthy. Though he was supposed to be in his 60s, he looked like he was over 70. The moment I recognized him as Henry, I turned on my heel, intending to run away. However, he quickly stepped in front of me and grinned.
Hey, ignoring your ex-husband now? That's cold. Let's talk for a bit.
I furrowed my brows and stopped in the hallway.
So, what have you been up to since I dumped you? You must have had a rough time, right?
I didn't answer and remained silent, and Henry, still smiling, said,
Has the old lady kicked the bucket yet? I'm happy. Got grandkids now.
Then, without being asked, he started bragging about how lucky he was.
My son, born after we split, now works at a big company. His wife is beautiful, and my grandkid is so cute. Could even be a child actor.
And so on. After going on for a while, he looked at me with a smug grin.
Hey, aren't you going to say anything? What kind of miserable life have you been living?
At that moment, I completely lost it. This man, who hadn't changed at all in 25 years, needed to be faced with reality. I lifted my head and smiled brightly. I'll introduce you to my company, which has been established for 25 years, and my family.
What?
Henry looked confused. At that moment, I called out to my family, still inside the cosmetic store. David, Kate, Mom, could you come over here? Hearing my voice, they came toward us. Seeing my mother leaning on her cane but walking steadily, Henry stood frozen, his mouth agape.
Mom, how are you alive?
When my mother, now over 80, saw it was Henry, she glared at him.
Henry, right? It's been a long time. Is there something wrong with me still being alive?
Henry shifted uncomfortably and looked away.
But you were supposed to have an incurable disease, right? I thought you.
Then I explained. After that, my mother's condition stabilized and her fever went away. While she had been diagnosed with an incurable disease, some patients only experience one severe episode, with the symptoms rarely recurring after that. It seemed my mother was one of those cases, and she was discharged from the hospital. Since then, she had only experienced symptoms twice. At those times, she was hospitalized but discharged not long after that. For the last 15 years, she hasn't had any more fevers related to her illness, and despite regular checkups, she's in good health.
I see. So, who are these people then?
Looking nervously at the man and young woman behind my mother, Henry asked, "Let me introduce them. This is my current husband, David Brown, and this is our daughter, Kate."
What?
Henry stood there with his mouth hanging open again.
Hey, you remarried. And what's this about a daughter? You were supposed to be infertile.
I smiled and replied, "I remarried David 2 years after we got divorced, and when I was 39, Kate was born. It seems you thought I was infertile, but there was never anything wrong with my body. Maybe we just weren't a good match." Henry looked at my current, well-dressed husband, David, and our daughter, Kate, now a college student, with a look of shock, as if he were about to pass out.
You just mentioned something about a 25th anniversary or something.
Yeah, I said that and pointed to the cosmetic store we had just come out of, Ever Merry Beauty. This is my company. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year.
What?
Henry's face froze as he stared at the cosmetic store next to us. The name of the store, Ever Merry Beauty, was illuminated by white neon lights. Inside the store, there was an air of luxury, and it was bustling with women of various age groups. I came to check out the shop here at the mall for the first time today. As the CEO, I think it's important to see things firsthand. Henry, looking angry, responded,
You can't be the CEO of such a famous store. What kind of nonsense are you talking about?
I reached into my business card holder and handed him a card. The business card read, Ever Merry Beauty CO, Mary Anderson.
No way. Is this for real? 25th anniversary, you say?
I explained to a stunned Henry. After that, I used my mother's remaining savings to learn aesthetic techniques. Then, once my mother's symptoms settled down, we started the beauty salon. My mother's beauty salon had even attracted some actresses who came secretly. Thanks to word of mouth, the salon became fairly well known by the 3rd year, I continued. Henry's eyes widened as I spoke. And then I developed my own line of cosmetics for the salon. I had worked in pharmaceutical research on skin care, so that helped. The cosmetics were only sold at the salon, but more and more people wanted them. So I started a cosmetics business as well. Before I knew it, the company had grown this big. When I said that, my mother spoke up.
As for the beauty salon, Mary is now the CEO, and it's expanded nationwide. The name Ever Mary comes from her own name.
Of course, these 25 years hadn't been without struggles. But no matter what, my family had supported me. and that's how I was able to keep going. Henry alternated between looking at the store and my face, his lips trembling.
So, that's what happened. I got the picture now. Well, I'll be going.
He turned to leave, but my current husband, David, stopped him.
Since we're all here, how about sharing what you've been up to? I'm curious too.
I then said to David, apparently his son works for a famous company. His wife is beautiful, and their grandchild is so cute and could be a child actress. David smiled and replied,
Wow, that's impressive. We don't have grandchildren yet. Kate's still in college.
Our daughter Kate, looking quite intrigued, said,
Your son works for a famous company? I'm currently attending Harvard University, and I want to get a job without relying on my parents. Do you think I could work for a company like that?
Harvard University is, of course, a world-renowned institution. Its academic ranking is one of the top in the country, a prestigious institution.
Harvard University? Your daughter goes to Harvard University?
Henry mumbled under his breath, and I responded, Yes, that's right. So where did your son go to university, and where does he work? Henry's face stiffened with discomfort at the question, and just then a voice echoed through the space.
Hey, old man, you're here? Stop wandering around like that. You're just the porter.
Turning around, I saw a young man with a patchy blonde hair, looking rough around the edges. Who's this? Henry turned pale and didn't respond. I directly asked the young man, Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, Henry's ex-wife, and you are? The man replied,
What? You're the old man's ex-wife? I'm Richard, his son.
I spoke to him. I heard you work for a famous company. That's impressive. Richard tilted his head.
What? I just quit my construction job. What's a famous company?
Henry's face went white as a sheet. Richard, clearly irritated, added,
Well, I guess I'm done here. I brought this guy along as a driver and porter, but he's been a pain to deal with. I'm about to show him what's what. Anyway, my wife and kid are waiting for me.
He pointed to a flashy woman with light brown hair dressed like a delinquent, and a mischievous-looking boy with long hair, both looking bored. Yeah, that's right. Well, Henry, I wish you all the best. I smiled sweetly and watched as Henry, stumbling along, followed Richard out the door. A month later, I was with my husband, David, at a certain place. As we were leaving the building, I heard a voice I recognized.
Mary, what are you doing here?
There, in a shabby suit, was Henry. Oh, just had a chat with the president of your company. When I said that with a smile, Henry's eyes went wide in disbelief.
With the president? Why would you be talking to the president?
At that moment, David stepped in.
It wasn't Mary who was talking to the president. It was me.
What?
Henry blinked, and David handed him a business card.
I should have introduced myself earlier.
You're the president of Anderson Corporation? That's one of our big clients.
Henry's face went pale. It turns out David is the president of a large company. We met through a study group for business owners. Then David spoke.
Mr. Miller, I heard that you said some harsh things to my wife before we joined you. You called my mother an old lady and looked down on my wife. I got pretty upset about that, so I decided to look into you.
Well,
Henry muttered something, but David ignored him.
I was surprised when I found out you work for one of our business partners. I also looked into your personal life and found out that your wife left you 20 years ago. and you raised your son on your own. That's quite admirable.
David said with a smile. Henry's face was turning purple.
I also heard that your son dropped out of a local technical high school and married a woman who worked in the nightclub. Those were the people I met recently, right? But the story seems quite different from what I heard.
Henry looked down, avoiding our gaze.
And now you're living with your son's family while you work at this company and support the household. That must be tough.
Then Henry's face turned bright red.
So what? What are you trying to say?
At that moment, I spoke up. I'm saying we're going to stop doing business with your company. Henry stood there, mouth agape, frozen in shock. David said, still maintaining his smile,
Someone who has pushed my family to the brink in the past and continues to insult them now? I don't want to do business with a company like that. I've already informed the president. He's quite angry about it.
At these words, Henry suddenly started panicking.
No. If we lose the deal with Anderson Corporation, our company will go under. Please, I beg you, don't do this, Mr. Anderson.
Henry apologized desperately to David, but David remained calm.
I've already made my decision.
Realizing pleading wouldn't help, Henry turned to me.
Mary, please tell your husband to stop. If this becomes my responsibility, I'll be kicked out of the company. I can't lose my job. I need to support my family.
I looked at him coldly. When I asked you to pay for my mom's hospital money, what did you say?
Well,
You laughed and said, no way, while I was begging you, and then made a life with your mistress and abandoned me and my sick mother. Do you remember that? Henry couldn't say a word, his face covered in cold sweat as he began to tremble. I was ready to move on with my new life, to forget about you. But after we met again, seeing you still looking down on me, I made my decision. I'm going to get my revenge for what I couldn't do back then. Henry crumpled to the floor. His face turned pale. Hey, why do I have to save you? This is all your own doing. You have no choice but to accept the consequences. I said slowly, trying to make him understand, and Henry, in that moment, went almost insane. He dropped to the floor, holding his head, screaming incomprehensibly. Watching his pitiful state, David spoke to me.
Mary, let's go home. Our family is waiting.
Yeah, I answered, and we walked away together, side by side. Though I could still hear Henry's crying and shouting behind me, I didn't look back. Later, I received a report from Henry's workplace president. Henry had been repeatedly asking to stay at the company after being questioned by the president. However, since Henry was the reason the deal with David's company was lost, the president had no choice but to let him go, and Henry was ultimately fired. After hearing the report, David, seeing the president begging, seemed to have relented and decided to resume the business deal. From here, this is what I heard from my former mother-in-law, whom I contacted after 25 years. By the way, my former in-laws were decent people, and when they heard that Henry had abandoned me and remarried his mistress, they cut ties with him. However, Henry contacted them again. Although he received a small severance package, Henry was heavily criticized by his son's family for losing his job. According to my former mother-in-law, Henry had been parasitic to his son's family for a long time, being exploited by his son, his tough daughter-in-law, and his spoiled grandchild.
Go earn money for our living expenses.
Commanded by his son, Henry began searching for a new job. However, at over 60 years old, there was no good job for him, and his income drastically dropped. Eventually, his son's family, growing impatient, took the severance money from him, and kicked him out of the house.
I don't want to live alone at over 60.
He pleaded with his son and daughter-in-law, but they dismissed him coldly.
If you can't earn money, you're just a nuisance, old man.
His son's family then disappeared. Henry, with this tale, begged his parents in the countryside,
Let me go home, or at least lend me some money.
but my former in-laws refused him without hesitation.
Don't ever show your face again.
That was the last time they spoke to him. In the end, it seems that Henry is living alone in a rundown apartment, doing day labor, with his life on the brink of falling apart. He has no job, no money, and no family to help him. He will likely grow old in solitude from now on. But even after hearing all of this, I couldn't feel any sympathy for him. As for me, I live happily with my family while running a successful company. In fact, sometime after I took my revenge on Henry, I was awarded a prize for excellent female entrepreneurs, and it was featured in magazines and newspapers. My family was thrilled for me, and I felt so happy that my years of hard work had been recognized. My mother lovingly stroked my head, just like when I was a little girl.
This is the result of your hard work, Mary. I'm so proud that you're my daughter.
I looked at my mother and said, "I'm so glad to be your daughter, Mom. Please take care of yourself and live a long life." 5 years after our last encounter with Henry, David and I are still a happy couple, and my mother is still in good health. Kate, who had joined my company after graduating from university, came with a serious-looking young man.
Dad, Mom, Grandma, I want to marry this man.
David, my elderly mother, and I were all overjoyed. The young man was Kate's classmate from university, and he seemed like a trustworthy person. Kate, congratulations. I'm getting older, and I think it's time to pass the company on to you. When I said this, Kate's eyes filled with tears.
I'm so happy that you're entrusting me with the company that carries the love of Grandma and Mom. I'll run it with him. Please, Mom, rest easy from now on.
At her words, I too couldn't hold back my tears. From now on, I want to continue cherishing my beloved family and live a peaceful life.